Hello, my name is Shanae, and I'm here once again with Bhavani Maki for another conversation. We are grateful for you for tuning in with us today. There are so many ways to spend your time and energy, and we're so happy that you've chosen to be with us. Here, Bhavani, let's dive in.
I've
Dive. Okay, so I want to talk about death, the big one. But I love how you've said it over the years in considering death as the next great experience. Perhaps it's me just getting older. I mean, I'm not old, but getting older. But it might also be part of becoming a parent, is that it's just so relevant for me that I am going to die. The fact is real. And it's not really a topic that scares me. That's probably my scorpionic nature, but it interests me. But I thought it would be useful to talk about in the context, like you said, as the yogi considers death as the next great wonder-filled experience.
Yes, it definitely reframes things. And from what I've been, learned in my seven adventures to India, where they're really like celebrating a birthday is kind of um, an inclusion of a Western tradition. It's more about, there's celebrating the death day of someone. And I know in Greece they do this too. It's like you honor the day that person departed um as being really significant, It's like how we are remembered, how we are held within the memory of people, and the way that we've touched them is it's a culmination of everything. The things that like maybe we were still stuck on, maybe others aren't stuck on in the same way. So, yeah, it is honored as being the culmination of our life experience and that it's not final.
Yes. Okay, we're done. No, I'm kidding. That's just the beginning, right? It really feels like just the beginning, as it's not final. And so many of us, I mean, I'm totally afraid to die. But to be able to have these kinds of conversations, and I'm wondering if you have some insights, maybe from your time, but I also felt that in India also, is that there was not this fear around death, but some practices we might incorporate in our daily lives to begin to not be so afraid of this experience of living, which includes death.
That's it. I mean, it's really more about fear of life. And isn't it interesting that in the Yoga Sutra, like the thickest veil that we need to be able to live with, embrace as protection, as covering, and as a necessary phase that we're going to go through is our own death. And Patanjali calls it abhinivesha, which is the resistance to our transformation, clinging to life as we know it. And he even says, svara sabahi vidusho apitatarutopi nivesha. Even the wisest of sages has this um encoded imprint. It's in our biology to want to sustain life and perpetuate. And so, when we can appreciate that this is the way that we're wired, but we don't have to function within a limited understanding of that, we start to look at a larger continuity of legacy.
Mm.
And that we've left some deep footprints behind, and that our time was meaningful, we were of sacred usefulness. So if we're living in that constant fear, it is going to close us off from life and being participating in life in a way that is creative. um this just reminds me of the passing of one of my dear friends, and she struggled with breast cancer. She was able to heal herself the first time. And then the second time it came around as colon cancer. And it was like, it was pretty far progressed. She decided that she was going to do this natural healing process. And it was a rigorous protocol of juicing like 7 times a day, and it was really stressing her out, and she was in a lot of pain. And she was afraid to take like any kind of painkillers because she thought it would clog her liver, which would then, prevent her from healing. But it was really kind of, it was her time, and she had to let go. And I just remember talking to her and saying, what about like quality of life? Like,
Mm.
if this is stressing you out, how is that healing you? What about that? And I just watched her slowly kind of let go of these rigid ideas of how things should be, of even like trying to hold on to her life when the quality was so terrible.
Mm.
And it was really interesting. It was towards the end of COVID. She still hadn't accepted her own inevitable passing. The cancer had metastasized. And at that point, during the COVID, what was it called? Incubation or whatever. Um, they said that you could have a gathering of 20 people outdoors. And so she very carefully, like, put together her guest list, and we were talking, and she wanted me to sing, and I was like, oh my god, I haven't like performed as a musician in decades. And I was like, how about this song? And she didn't want that song, she wanted another song. And it was like everything was really controlled to the umpteenth degree. And I was like, okay, and then she told me that the guest list she'd invited were all people. Well, first of all, she didn't even really see it as like her farewell gathering. It was a healing gathering,
Mm.
in which she was praying for her ability to sustain this body in this incarnation. And she said that she had chosen these people so that she could forgive them. Wow. Right. And I was like,
Wow.
oh, okay. And, I mean, she had been through a lot,
Mm.
definitely.
Yeah.
Um, and hadn't really been able, like, had a really traumatic childhood, but kind of had hope that just doing some yogasanas and eating well and living well was going to heal it. And I was just like, do yourself a favor, get some counseling, get some support. It was really hard because there was a lot of mistrust in her system. And it became a barrier in all the relationships. It's like the friendship could only go so far because she didn't even know how to trust who was trustworthy.
Mhm.
That's a real problem, right? So anyway, it was like, okay, well, I guess we're all going to be forgiven for, the transgressions that we've made, and that's okay. And then as time went on and I just watched her, it was like as the prana started to leave her ego could not hold on to its position
Mm.
anymore.
Mm.
She didn't have the energy to hold on to the narratives, the relationships, the positioning, and she just got softer and softer. And I would go visit her, and she was often weeping. And, as she got softer, and she said, I'm not crying because I'm sad. I'm just filled with so much gratitude for this
Mm.
life. It's so beautiful. And she
Mm.
was an artist. She said, my only regret is there's so much more that I wanted to create and to make.
Mm.
Um, but it was such a beautiful teaching to just see that letting go process, and that, those things that we hold on to, um, they're draining. They take a lot of life force and they create a lot of resistance. And you're not able to really enjoy this very fragile, tentative apparition that you take in this life, in this life form. So, excuse me. Um, that was an amazing thing to watch, was just like, that's the gift of death, right? Is that you really have to let go. And as my dear friend Paula says, the last thing to die is the ego.
Mm,
It's the first thing, right, that's born. Ahamkara is the first breath I am
mm,
doing.
mm.
And then that last release, that last exhale. So, ways that we can practice death include releasing our need to be right. The ego's right to be right, okay, to like assert its presence, its fixity, um, releasing the resentments that we hold, releasing the need to control outcome, even like what our death is going to look like. We don't know. Releasing the strategies that we hold that keep us armored. Um, the releasing the idea or the self concept where we always need to look composed or to have it together.
Mm,
So every time we can loosen that grip, and of course, in the Vedas, it's called moksha, right? Which is a loosening up, a slackening up. You're like, oh wow, like if I can just let go. I mean, it's such a it's such a process. I mean, we're doing it all the time. How much are we holding ourselves up? How much are we girding ourselves? Can we really trust in this incarnation?
mm,
Being able to let down in your body. And people are afraid that if they let go, they're going to fall. But
mm,
actually, that's when they receive support and they find lift in their system. That's the experience of enlightenment or kaivalya, is in that trust that there is something bigger than you that's holding it all together, that things are going to be okay. Things are going to go through their own cycles. They're going to go through their own, you know, ripening, waning, dissolution, reintegration, that there's a greater cycle that we're a part of. And that's where, for me, rather than even thinking about it as death, I like to call it the afterlife, because that's an unknown and that's a question. Um, we don't know. We don't know what is the afterlife. I mean, we may have a sense of it. In my personal experience, I feel really blessed because I had my own brush with death. Um, and yet actually the idea of death didn't even come into my awareness. I've shared how I was like cosmically hit by a car walking across the street. I looked left, I looked right, I looked left. I was making a very significant phone call. I had to cross the street to access the payphone. And as I was looking in all the directions and doing as I was supposed to do to keep my body safe, as I stepped into the street, I had to sneeze. And the next thing I knew, I was just floating and I felt this infinite expansion in my system and light. And I saw the light and it was like so ecstatic. And I just remember being like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, I so wanted to go there. And for a moment, I thought, is there anything I need to go back to or come back for? And I did like a quick inventory. I don't have kids. I was crossing the street to break up with the bad controlling boyfriend. Like I was free to leave, and I was like, this is it. I'm just going to let go. Like I've been waiting my entire existence to feel this, to experience this, and it was just like wonderful. It was amazing. And then I was pulled back into my body by the woman who had hit me with her car, was screaming, oh my God, somebody help me. And I was like, shit, I got to go back and help this person.
Oh, wow.
Like I wanted to go, but I'm wired to help, and to facilitate. And I came back in my body and she was standing over me. And I was like, okay, I got to get up and help her. And my body wouldn't move.
Mm,
And then I went out again. And it was just like, I mean, it's like just the most comfortable, warm, light, loving, ecstatic space. Like I had nothing, no part of me wanted to hold back. And then it was the paramedics who resuscitated me. So I really got to experience that, like death or afterlife or whatever it is, it felt really natural.
mm,
It felt like coming home. It felt like a relief. It felt like a reward.
mm.
And what a gift to have at 20 years old in your
Yeah.
life. Now, that being said, and I know you can relate to this, and any parent, it's like once I had my baby, I was like, I don't have the luxury to die.
Absolutely.
Everything shifted. It's like now it's my Kuleana, it's my responsibility to make sure this kid is okay, to get them on their own feet, etc. So it's like, yeah, those things change. And I mean, I haven't had that experience since then, but it was it was a really enlightening experience.
Yeah.
And of course like many of my friends are a bit older and they've had some brushes with their mortality, with illnesses, and now with modern medicine. I mean, there's so many ways that we can prolong our life, but you start to consider that, what would that look like? And yet there's a deep trust within me because there's a bigger fabric. There's people like who would step up and would help. And it's like we can lean into each other because our soul connection is so deep that we're always there for each other. Um, yeah. So maybe instead of seeing, you know, death as final, it's another threshold. And even in, I love Taimani's, translation of the Yoga Sutra. In the last sutra, he says, "Look, here it is. We've received instructions in how to live an awakened life, and this is as far as it goes. Because when you leave this human apparition or incarnation, you're going to be in another dimension." He doesn't say which one it is, and we can trust that we'll receive the instruction and the insight and the support we need when we get there. So it's like each stage marks finality, but then there's another stage, and we see that in life. So it's like so interesting that as humans we've created like this behemoth of death as being something to be afraid of rather than recognizing it as just a natural cycle. And the mystery of the unknown. I mean, that's like, hasn't that been the amazing journey for us in yoga? It's like, oh my gosh, like it's so rich when we step into that mystery. There's so much magic. There's so much that I don't know and don't understand. And we develop that shraddha, what
Mm,
brings most people anxiety. And it's not a certitude of something you can hold on to, but it's like, and maybe that's the gift of like time, is like the seeing that there's a benevolent force that is holding us. So yeah, it feels really appropriate that in my own evolution of my ritual of sadhana, of letting go of all of these ideas of pulling up, of lifting up, of holding yourself up, of aligning yourself in orthogonal shapes, and feeling myself more as sporadic, um, round, my movements to be more cyclical, and feeling myself as being more like a field.
Mm,
And then Patanjali even, he says it's like, the I love this word, perfection or mastery of asana, is when you can lean into something bigger,
mm,
something infinite,
mm,
and you actually become fused with that. So
mm,
we're developing this trust, um, and faith, and that we also have that instinct to tune into something that is so present that we can't hold on to, but that is holding us, and we can behold it in a different way. Yeah, it's also really poignant that we practice our death every time, like we our ritual of sadhana culminates, even in our exhalation, in that release of what we've been holding within us, that release of um, the pelvic floor, feeling that cycle that's happening, how phases arise and they fall. There's always something that's emergent that's happening there. And so in that sutra on the exhalation, pracharna vidarana vyamva pranasya, um, Patanjali invites us to practice that letting go through our exhalation. And so on the inhalation, it innervates our nervous system to become more active. And our exhalation, there's dropping into the sympathetic state. And on the inhalation, it's like our egoic self is fortified. And on that exhalation, there's an emptying out of that, in which
mm.
one of two things remain. You remember this? Either,
Yes.
yeah, our vasana or pure prana. And so it's quite interesting, learning in the Vibhuti Pada, and they speak about death. So where to begin on this? So Vasana is like you've been seated with a mission, with a desire that is within the continuity of your ancestry, that we're all the time like there's the wound the ancestry carries, and behind it is the gift, is the wish that no one is healing the whole thing in one generation, because there is adaptation, there is um, whatever, there's progress. So at the end of that exhalation, it's like if there's something that's still calling you that is incomplete, that is going to kick you into the next inhale, when there is just pure prana, which is pure energy and consciousness. um, you might just evaporate into that, unless, the higher intelligence or the powers that be pull you back in for another cycle. So in
Mm,
every breath, there's a whole cycle that's occurring, and the yogis measure their lifespan in those breaths. I think it's like 21,960 breaths per day. I mean, who's counting, right? But how we use our life force. And again, how much of our life force is hemorrhaged in this idea of needing to control outcome, needing to do, needing to assert our presence, to uh our to not become irrelevant, but to maintain that persona and persona in the world. So when we can release that, something magical starts happening. There's the opportunity for afterlife in every breath of the day.
Ah, that's beautiful. Thank you. And worry. I was going to add so much unnecessary life energy is spent to worry. I have the worry gene in my family.
I think we all, and it's a potent mind altering drug, you know.
It's absolutely.
And
Yeah.
it's like there's so much we worry about that could happen, and then we get lost in all these narratives and scheming and calculations, and there's so much mystery. There's always solutions that happen that we couldn't really have seen. So can we remain open to that? And so much, as we've learned in yoga, is not about building up, but seeing what you can throw away. And Patanjali even says that, even your ideas of practice and what it looks like. um I was sharing in yesterday's sutra class how in the last immersion slash training that I gave, I had this really lovely woman come, and she had been trained, and she um the ujjayi breathing, which is like this victory breath, and certainly making our breath sonorous so we're aware of it, something that a lot of people aren't aware of, is helpful. But it also can become something that's limiting. And I could just, it was so interesting for me because I know, like when I opened the sutra, and in the sadhana pada, it was speaking on the sutras on pranayama, and then it said uh wait a second, vayabhyantara vishaya kshepi chaturtaha. So it spoke before about how pranayama, so yama is the god of death. Ayama is to let go of the constraints that we hold ourselves in. It's like expanding our vital capacity, our internal volume, and our capacity for capacity in life. That first we do it by measuring the inhalation, the exhalation, the pauses in between, and careful placement of the breath. And that, and then he says dirga sukshmaha, it should become increasingly subtle. Okay.
Mm.
Then the next sutra he says, and then there is a whole other dimension, chaturdaha, the fourth dimension. So now fourth dimension is beyond time, beyond space, beyond causality. And like how do we usually navigate how much time we have, how much space we have, what are going to be the consequences? If I do this, then that will happen, right? Then the fourth dimension is where you throw all of that away, vikshepa. It's like, okay, all of these were tools, but now I'm serving the tools. Now the tool, it's like we're building we're building this house, and I, talk to Ray, and he's always like, make the tool work for you, don't work for the tool. It's so practical, but it's really true. And when the tool isn't working for you, like, get rid of it or find something that works or use it and then put it down. So then you enter this whole other dimension, which is called Turiya.
Mm.
So there's Jagrit, Sushupta, and what is the other one? Sushupti. Jagrit is the waking state. Sushupti, I think, is the oh, I'm not remembering right now. I'm sorry. But there's the waking state, and then there's the like dream state, and there's the deep sleeping state, and then the fourth state is Turiya, which isn't even the fourth. It's in a class of its own. So this is where um you're awake even when you're awake. Most people,
Mhm.
when they're awake, they're just, it's like watching this tendency where you've you've learned something, you've trained yourself so well that it has become so choreographed that it's part of your identity, like
Mm.
ujjayi breathing.
Mhm.
Okay. And then the dream state, realizing that, like, you're conscious in these, you can be conscious in these dream states as well as being asleep. And Patanjali says most people are just asleep all of the time.
Mm.
So being able to navigate or understand and realize your own essence, your own eternal essence, even when you're going through these different stages, different phases or cycles of consciousness that we go through in every day, um, you enter a whole other dimension.
Mm.
And it's like needing to do things well, to do things right. Um, when you can let go of that, he says there's a complete transformation of your psychology.
Mm.
So sometimes, like having these very controlled practices, we get stuck in the practice and we don't, and it can actually limit us. So
Mm.
even the ujjayi breathing, I mean, look, it's a great tool, but it's actually pretty rudimentary.
Mhm.
It is because you have to tense your throat
Yeah.
a little bit, okay? Which then, as soon as you tense your throat, your esophageal nerve is embedded in your psoas, which
Mm.
is continuous with your respiratory diaphragm and continuous with your pelvic floor and the vagus nerve. This is that state of like hypervigilant regulation that actually doesn't allow you to feel prana as more than your breath. We tend to limit prana to breath.
Mm.
Prana is the expression of consciousness as infinite.
Mm.
So, in being able to let go of that, let go of the holding patterns, there is a shift in the tonicity of our structure.
Mm.
It's not one again of holding yourself up, holding it together. You know, it's like the biggest effort is to let go of the effort. That's what like real trust is.
Mm.
Really leaning into something is. So there's a shift in our tonicity. Um, there's a shift in how our internal pressures relates to external pressures. It creates a change in our metabolism, in our cellular structure, and it creates a total shift in our psyche and our psychology.
Mm.
So it just feels really interesting to me. And it's like, and then Patanjali in that very same sutra 247 of leaning into something bigger, he's like, oh my God, this is endless. You're tuning into something endless. And so, how could it be anything but endless?
Yeah.
Because you're you're leading into the infinite. There is no end to any of this.
Mm.
Yeah.
Do you sense that it's fear or what what might be the piece, the piece of, is it fear of the unknown? Is it fear of letting ourselves go, fear of not having things under control or looking incompetent or I'm just wondering.
I think it's all of that.
Yeah.
And there's this real narrative, at least in the West, of fear of damnation.
Mm. Mm.
You know, that you're going to like burn, or it's going to be this, deep abyss, or this, clamoring for some kind of exalted state.
Mm.
And, it's like Patanjali says, even like heaven is an intermediary phase.
Mhm.
Um, so I do believe it's all of that. Yeah. And that maybe that like unless you're there to control and direct things, things are not going to go well, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Um, could
It's
be a
interesting.
lot. There's infinite things to be afraid of, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And what it's reminding me of the story of your friend and just like, wanting to control how she went out, how the transition went. Reminded me of something my midwife said to me in terms of, I don't know, she offhandedly would say these very profound things about, like, oh, people who don't clean their houses often have better births, like she'd just say that, and I was like, wait, but it got in there. But what it reminded me of is, I didn't prepare for birth. I didn't really want to, in terms of, reading, I read Ina May Gaskin's, Spiritual Midwifery, and that was a fantastic book, and I loved it, but I didn't really, I wanted my own experience, without other people's input. But what I wish I would have prepared for was the level of fear that arose that I was not expecting at all. I remember being in the birth tub and I'm just like, whoa, I am so afraid. But I didn't have really the faculties to be like, what am I afraid of? What do I do? I was just like, it was like waves of, it was more of a sensation of contraction. That was the sensation that my body, it was like, I'm afraid. And then it would kind of go, but I was like, but I could name it as fear. And I'm just curious. I don't know what it's going to be like, on the deathbed, but and I'm also wondering about these shamanic practices, working with plant medicine, but also working with the breath on the exhale, are ways of working with fear. What's your sense of that?
Um, it just reminds me of this saying, which really rang true for me, that when you experience fear, there's some truth that is present.
Mm,
So even
mm,
maybe our ideas of what fear is, and as you were sharing your birth experience, it's like, yeah, man, I mean, the contractions are so intense that, like, of course our mind interprets it as fear. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So but then it's like, there's, I don't know about you, there was part of me, and somebody had said this to me too, like, everybody who's ever been born has gone through this. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So, like, you're
Hmm.
not the first, you won't be the last, and you have this amazing team that's going to help you, and we have so many, assets with the medical field. It's like, this is pretty much going to work out. So there was that kind of leaning into the historical aspect. um you know it's really, that's most of our life, is unwinding the the way that we respond to the traumas that we've experienced and that we've inherited. And as we know, with trauma work, it's not like one and done. And it's like they even say three times a charm, so, like, it's like, you're gonna unpack a certain amount of it, you're gonna get to a certain point, then it's gonna get triggered again, then you're gonna have to revisit it again. And it's like, we know in trauma work you can't do it all at once, or it's gonna throw the system into shock and shut down, right? And people can die from being in that place of, like, trying to undo it too quickly, that place
Hmm.
of shock.
Hmm.
So, it's like, it's going to come in phases, and sometimes it feels good and sometimes it feels worse, but there is a continuity that happens. And a big part of it is being able to really see, like, the integration that has you have incurred or embodied, and realizing that you're not stuck in that one place. Like, there has been movement, there has been momentum, and how even maybe that trauma was the external pressure that caused you to open new layers of yourself, explore new things, that unless you had received that external pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So the trauma remains, but our relationship to it changes. And we start to see, like, wow, actually, there was a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there were so many blessings behind being hit by that car, even though I was ready to make my exit in that moment. Life wasn't done with me, and it led me down. And then coming back into my body, it was the first time I ever really felt pain in my body. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like when you're little and it's like you don't even, it's not a limitation at all. Suddenly it was like, oh my God, all this fragility. And then I had to hold certain areas because they needed protection. And now, like, I'm still unwinding those holding patterns. And it's as scary as dying sometimes. Like, as I shared, unbeknownst to me, my fourth lumbar was fractured. And so then I had to, like, you know, gird it and hold it up. And it's like I'm still unwinding that. And sometimes I'm like, oh my God, if I let that go, and then something will move. It's like a body that isn't held tightly makes sound. So there'll be a gurgle or there'll be a crack. I've even heard sounds like cellophane wrap ripping, like
Wow.
literally. And there's a moment where I'm not breathing and I'm like, this could either be great or it could be terrible. Like, am I not going to be able to walk? You know what I mean? Like, there's that moment. And it's like, I have to trust, because in those moments is often where there's a huge cathartic release. Can I let that go? And sometimes actually I'll be in a little bit of trouble because now the whole holding system has become fragmented. So it's like, there's this, we come, we have to come to our own, through our own process, to realize that there is beneficence, there is a benevolent force that is guiding creation, and again, there's so many narratives that God is punishing
Mm-hmm.
and God is cruel. But like, you know, we start to see a bigger picture, a bigger continuity, and being able to lean into that. It's like our ability to discern what we can lean into, and then also our ability to develop that trust where we're willing to lay our hearts bare. It reminds me of Kirti Mukha, who is that being, the it's like often kind of a grotesque face that's above temple doors or above the
Mm-hmm.
deities, with his lolling tongue and his fangs and his like bloodshot eyes. And it's like, all he asks is that you lay yourself open and bare to commune with the holy, beyond the cover, beyond the practices and the rituals. Just come with a pure and open heart to to be a part of life, to know that the thread of life is continuous, and you're going to go through many incarnations and iterations. I mean, talk about motherhood. It's like a huge threshold, and when we look in indigenous traditions, they say that it's like, the woman has to die, the maiden has to die and leave her body in order to bring this soul through the birth canal and into incarnation. I didn't really realize how much giving birth was actually a process of dying. And you don't just do it once, right? It's like every freaking contraction, and
Yeah.
there's a whole team. It's like, you're going to die.
Yeah.
So this baby is going to be born. And then, like, how do you step into that when you're totally like, I mean, I know everybody has their own experience, but I was like shattered.
Yeah.
I was really shattered. And it took Ray, and then having like this intense fear, which I thought was personal, but the more
Mm-hmm.
I talked to mothers, They have like this intense fear that their baby isn't going to be okay. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, Nico would just like, he would take an inhale and then he would take an exhale. And then literally, I would count. It would be like a count of 8
Yeah.
till he took his next breath. He's just learning how to breathe on his own. And so, can you imagine every breath? I'm like,
Oh,
you're
I
not.
didn't sleep the whole first night because I was like making sure my baby was breathing. Like wild. Yeah.
I know that's why I'm like, just enjoy the pregnancy because they're fine in there. You know what I mean? They've got what they
Oh,
need.
yeah.
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 So, so much of our life also is just like unburdening ourselves and being able to not carry um the image that keeps coming to me is of like a rope in which the ends are all frazzled. And
Mm,
I know that's what our nervous system does. The dendrites, when we have unmetabolized trauma, is we just have all these splits and we have all these frazzled energies. And being able to say what needs to be said, to be cleaner in our interactions,
mm,
um, to express love and gratitude sooner, to not hold ourselves back, not to withhold from ourselves or others. And also like death is such a gift because it's like time is precious. So how can you really like Anushasanam extract the nectar of that and know that your death is coming. I mean, in the Vibhuti Pada, it talks about that. It's like signs that death is approaching.
mm.
And then that the yogi is like really strategic about that. I mean, yesterday's sutra was speaking about the point behind the ear.
I loved that. That was
And
so
Pandit
good.
Rajmani Tiguna, it's like that point behind the ear is where you open up your headspace. You open up your capacity to listen. Um, and that like Pandit Rajmani Tigunati goes into it in an interesting way. He's like, and knowing that when death comes, you don't have the life force in the same way to navigate. We can do that in life, but over that threshold, it's like the ego is not gonna maintain. So there is going to be a continuity in whether or not you believe in the afterlife, that like certain memories will have a stronger hold than other memories. And so being able to discern which memories and storylines that you would want to be part of the continuum
Mm,
and being able to let go the ones that don't serve. Those are the ones that we haven't really processed, or we still feel some guilt or some remorse, because we haven't come clean with ourselves or with others, right? I mean, we're all going to feel remorse, but the guilt that 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 freezes us or stultifies us, right? It's like making peace, with ourself, making amends, um so that we can hold on to the wisdom if we are going to take another incarnation, that we can actually, not have to keep recycling those narratives, which is what most of history does.
mm. So well said. Thank you. I want to ask you one more question about speaking to one another and particularly our children about death in a more holistic way. My son's not there yet. He's not asking about death, but I did kill a spider the other day and he wanted to see. He was like, see, see? And I was like, ah, it's dead, and he didn't say much. He just looked at it and I was like, I'm gonna go throw it out now. Like, oh God. So, what have you done with Nico in the past in terms of talking about death?
Well, there is a phase, there is a developmental phase. I forgot what age it is, where they're really interested in death.
Mm,
It's like around 6 or something, and he's going
mm,
to ask a lot about it.
mm,
It was interesting. We had some friends visiting. They have their own place here, and they would bring their dog with them. And so they made like the obligatory, trip to Costco on the way from the airport. And as they were like, putting their groceries in the car, their dog jumped out and was like killed right there when they had arrived.
mm,
And it was really, really devastating. It was,
mm,
their beloved
mm,
uh, animal family member. And then they asked if they could bury the dog on our farm. It's
mm,
like they live in Princeville. You can't really bury a dog in the golf course. And we were like, of course. And then I just remember being like, so Ray like
mm,
took out the backhoe and dug a big hole over by the lemon tree.
mm.
Um, you know, sour, sad kind of
Yep.
a thing, where we had also buried some of our pets. And I was kind of like, oh, do we let Nico see this animal?
Mm,
And it was like, yes. And it was really interesting. Like, he wasn't afraid. Kids are
mm,
actually less afraid of death than most of adults, but they become afraid because adults are like, oh, we don't talk about it, or we tuck it away, or we hide it. But when it's just, appreciated as a natural part of life, we don't hush it, we don't make it secret, we don't lie about it. We speak about, like, look at how autumn turns into winter, compost turns into soil, and that soil becomes plants, and it's all part of this greater continuity in which endings allow for new beginnings. And then we also normalize grief as an expression of love, that it's a proof that love is real, and that you're allowed to cry, that that's part of your phrasing of that loved one. um it's an important thing. I just, speaking of this, the softening
mm,
that occurs, that can occur as we maybe just enter into the twilight years of our life. I was talking to my mother, who just turned 91, and she said to me, Sylvia, take care of yourself. Like, take care of yourself.
mm,
Life is short.
mm,
And, she's a woman who's really like, she's had to be strong. She's held strong. And usually she doesn't get very soft and gushy, or when she does, she quickly like refortifies. She's Nordic, so there's like an icy quality. And that's part of just having to live up in the subarctic and the Arctic circle. I've done a lot of therapy. I understand that. And so she's getting softer, and she's starting to say these things, and I'm like, wow, like she's on her way out, because she's finally like letting herself be vulnerable, be
mm,
open. It's very tender, it's very special. So she said, yeah, life is short, take care of yourself. And I said to her, well, Mom, your life is even shorter, so take care of yourself. And we
mm.
laughed, and I said, well, you've had a long life. And she goes, I know. She said, I have no future.
Mm,
I'm living in days.
mm,
And there's such a peace. She has such a peace. She has done a lot of things. She has survived a lot of things. She has tested a lot of things. She has given her all. And it's kind of like, you know, death will be a beautiful release. It's like and I feel so blessed to have had that experience. Like, can be really, really peaceful.
Mm,
Just really like how great to be like, you know what? You don't have to do all that anymore. You can just let go and know that you lived fucking passionately and intensely. And sometimes you were asleep, and sometimes you were in a dream, and sometimes you were awake. And like, good job. Like, just let go and see where where this takes you, you know?
mm,
And you can even let go of this idea of you, you know? It feels like a real embrace and a real return in that way. And knowing that, like, you have touched so many lives. I mean, wow, that was one of the most profound things for me was after having Nico and we did the meal train and, just kind of put it out there a little bit. I could not believe every day, like the beautiful meals that people cooked me and how many people were appreciative. And in my mind, I was like, oh, I probably offended that person. I did that to that person. And then just to see that, like, what they remembered was the love, the energy that I had shared, the way that I had invested myself. And um, they, isn't that the amazing thing about like intimate relationship? Is that they see what's beautiful about you, even when you don't, when you're
mm.
there and you're just like, oh, I messed that up, or did I offend them, or I could have done better. We'll never really know. But to have that kind of a reflection is a beautiful thing. And it reminds me of that same friend, Paula. She said that when she was at her aunt's deathbed, the last thing she said before she died was, what a waste.
Mm.
What a waste, you know?
Yeah.
So I
Mm,
think, it's like the deeper that we're just pierced by the intense fragility and tenderness and resilience of life, the sweet pain of being alive and the sweet pain of dying, and that we get to have this experience. It's just too big for us to wrap our mind around, and yet we have that within us.
amen. Thank you so much. This has been really useful for me personally, and I hope it is for other people. And I look forward to many more conversations with you.
Thank you, Shanae.
Yeah.
Aloha.